So you're known in many ways for the Philosophy Gourmet Report. And we were talking yesterday, and it was a lot of fun, about how that originated and developed and so on and so forth. From your perspective, of being there from the beginning and as it's grown, what do you see as its main effect on the discipline of philosophy?
Right. Well, let's see. I mean, I think the main effect has been to make available to a much wider range of students before timely information about the quality and strengths of different PhD programs in philosophy. And one thing I heard from departments over the years, but starting back in the 1990s, was departments noticed that the applications they were getting were better matched to their departments because students now were not just applying to the closest PhD program with no idea what they did. Students actually had some pretty, reasonable ideas about, gee, I think I'm interested in these things, so I'm going to apply here, but not to this place. So that was certainly an immediate effect. I think through the influence of the report, and we were talking about this earlier today with some of the undergraduates, using the influence of the report, I was able to get philosophy departments to be much more transparent about their placement data and to make that available on their websites. And it's still, to this day, it's better in philosophy, the information about job placement, than it is in any other academic field. The other academic field is still much more hit and miss. So I think that turned out to be a sort of salutary side effect. Those are probably the two main ones that, that come to mind. I suppose the other, well, now let me mention one other. I do think the effect of the report has been, a net gain of money devoted to philosophy at research universities. And for a very simple reason, because, every dean, let's say the dean of liberal arts is a historian. And everybody in every department is coming to them saying, if you give us money and we make this appointment, we'll be so much better. And so, and the dean, doesn't know. But the thing is, the philosophy department can come to the dean and say, give us some money to make a couple of appointments and wait 2 years. And then you'll see a couple hundred philosophers will look at our program, evaluate it, and you'll see that we weren't lying to you. It wasn't just puffery. You'll see our overall rating or improve, or all of a sudden we'll be listed as one of, the 10 best places in this specialty. And I know lots of departments that parlayed the report that way, all over the country. Some in terms of their overall ranking, Rutgers an example, many in order to get their administrations to allow them to build up in a particular specialty, right? University of South Florida was a good example there, where they wanted to build up and establish a real sort of center of excellence in history of philosophy. And having this external measure, which was fairly frequent and, and credible, was a good thing for a lot of philosophy departments. Yeah. Now, it was probably a bad thing for philosophy departments that actually weren't very good, because then they had to now explain things to their deans, and but they developed alternative strategies like silly objections to the report and personal attacks and things like that. But I think I've occasionally been asked by people in other disciplines, including even sometimes graduate students or faculty, gee, could you give us advice about how to set this up for art history or for psychology or something like that? And, I give them advice, but I also tell them, look, doing this is tantamount to putting a bullseye on your forehead. One of the reasons that I switched from doing it every year to every other year or every third year was because I was worried that departments were going to favor hiring senior established people over junior people. And I'd heard some anecdotes that suggested that might be a concern, and that didn't seem to me a good thing. So I thought doing it less frequently, right, reduces the incentive to get, the big bang for the buck by saying, we hired famous philosopher X this year. There's always this question about to what extent do the reputational surveys reflect the discipline or shape the discipline, right? I'm pretty sure they mostly reflect. But that is a reasonable worry, and I wouldn't want it to, particularly have that effect. I suppose I can point out that what the Philosophical Gourmet Report reflects is the importance of areas of philosophy that A, I don't work in, B, I'm not very interested in, and some I think are really pernicious, and it doesn't reflect the importance of what I work on, So it's not like I have a particular horse in the race that I want it to come out this way. No, Nietzsche studies should be the most important part of philosophy. But, we ask a couple of hundred people, and it turns out they don't think that. But, there is that danger. There is that danger. Part of what we try to do to guard against the danger is to have a pretty diverse pool of evaluators. And, people have raised, sort of almost breathtakingly silly objections about this. But if you actually look at the pool of evaluators, it's a pretty diverse pool of evaluators in terms of specialties, interests, backgrounds, and so on. And more importantly, everybody in the pool, is actually extremely competent, right? And, it's not like it's a bunch of, people of dubious competence who are doing these evaluations. Now, at some level, a lot of the objections really boil down to judgments about quality. And, there is the famous Dunning-Kruger effect in psychology, which is the less they know, the less they know it. And that's often a problem when you do these rankings. That is, the people who, in fact, aren't very smart and aren't doing very good work don't know that. Yeah. And so they think it's all just bias and prejudice against them. And it's always been made worse by the fact that, that I do a lot of work on post-Kantian, continental philosophy. So some people who are in departments that's how they self-identify. I think it makes things very awkward for them because they've been selling their deans a bill of goods for a long time. Well, we're continental and that's analytic. It's not that simple.
Yeah. So it developed for a long time from its origination to what it is today. Is it continuing to develop? Are there other horizons for the PGR? Are there different influences or things that it's going to take on? Or is it sort of become what it's going to be for the long term?
I can't say, for sure about the long term. And I haven't, Britt Brogard from the University of Miami, who joined me in editing the last version, we really haven't talked much about, the future. My guess is the basic format is going to, remain what it was. In the last 15 years, what are the major changes? We occasionally add some specialty areas or we regroup them in certain ways to try to capture things that are going on in the discipline. So, we added feminist philosophy. We added philosophy of race. Years ago, we used to have early modern broken up into rationalists and empiricists, but that is no longer thought to be a credible way of demarcating things by scholars of early modern philosophy. And so now we have 17th century, 18th century. Yeah. Right? So there's things like that. We've had discussion, should we add formal epistemology, right? That's probably one of the most recent discussions because there's a growing group of people very interested in formal epistemology. And, who knows what the future will hold in that regard. This is partly a matter of, the evolution of the discipline. And in these hard economic times for higher education, it's hard to predict the evolution of any academic discipline. So I won't venture a further guess.
Okay. One more topic. So you're also well known for a long-running blog.
Right.
And back when I was at the University of Missouri, we had a blog that was up and coming, and a lot of graduate students and some of the faculty, they were participating in it. And there was a sense that blogging might take on a really robust role within the discipline of philosophy. That was some years ago. So let me just ask a two-part question. One, what do you see the role of blogs being in the discipline, and do you see it developing? How do you see the practice of blogging contributing to the discipline going forward?
Well, let's see. I mean, I don't think blogs have contributed very much to substantive philosophy, and I just don't think it's a very good medium for that. Occasionally, and there are some substantive blogs that have carried on for a long time, but in general, I think the nature of that medium is it's a very useful way to communicate professionally relevant information. Right? It's a good medium for that, right? And it's very efficient, and and everybody can log on each morning and see if there's some information that that they care about. So I think it's good for that. It's sometimes good, for trying to mobilize, professional support for causes that are important, right? So this professor at Dickinson College, who has effectively been terminated by the college, even though he had tenure, and I think it looks like he's been treated pretty unfairly. But this was a good way to call attention to it, mobilize some people to donate money to help with his legal fees. So there are situations like that where it's useful. I do think it's very clear that those who blog and comment on blogs are not representative of the profession as a whole. Mm-hmm. And so you can come away with a very skewed view about what's important and what the priorities are. If your only source, as it were, is the blogs. And now there's a fair number of philosophy blogs, which wasn't true 10 or 12 years ago, and there's probably a half dozen or so that have a decent sized readership, a couple thousand visits a day maybe, or up to my august numbers of whatever it is, 11 or 12 on the weekdays, 12,000. 11 or 12, it wouldn't be worth the trouble. But still, I think it's skewed in certain directions, and I just pick that up from the communications I have offline in the real world with people versus what you see online. And some of it I do think has become partly generational. But I'm not convinced that the blogs are necessarily representing the younger generation particularly accurately either. So I think people need to read all the blogs with some understanding of that. I mean, a virtue of my blog is it's me, right? It has my personality all over it, right? And you can dismiss it, accept it, decide you agree with this, disagree with that. But there isn't a pretense that this is speaking for an entire, the entire discipline or anything like that. Some of the other blogs, I think, when a blog calls itself feminist philosophers, well, does that mean they speak for all the feminist philosophers? I'm absolutely certain they don't, since I know lots of them who roll their eyes whenever I bring that blog up. So people need to keep that in mind, that all the blogs in different ways have their voice or personality, their point of view, and then there's all those people who just don't participate in the life of inside philosophy cyberspace, which I frankly still think is the majority of the profession. Right? I could be wrong. At some point, maybe someone will do a systematic survey. I think that will change. I think we will get to a point where the entire profession, or 80-90%, is regularly consulting some online blogs. I mean, even the APA has started a blog now. So that's a sign they think they need to get in on this. APA doesn't speak for the profession either, but that's a different story. You probably know that very well.
Yeah.
Because the APA has obviously been captured by certain groups with certain political agendas, and those who aren't aligned with the favored agenda can often feel a little put off by things. So, and I've certainly heard that from philosophers at religious institutions.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we really appreciate you coming down this week. It's been a lot of fun, and thanks for taking the time to sit down and answer some questions.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.